This is Legal Talk on eRadio with Hahn Hahn Attorneys, and this week in the news, a Woolworths employee who was fired after submitting 2 suspicious medical certificates won her case in the Labour Appeal Court in Johannesburg after it was ruled that her dismissal was unfair. To go into this topic and telling us a bit more, we've got Hahn Hahn's Thabiso Chikudu joining us on air here on Legal Talk today. Thabiso, nice to chat to you again. Are you well?
Hi, Ian. I am well, thank you, and I hope you are well. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the listeners once more.
Yes, great to have you on board with us. And Thabiso, let's start with the basics. When is an employee required to submit a medical certificate or a sick note?
Well, thank you for that question. Let me start by saying we'll use the word sick note and medical certificate interchangeably. But in terms of the basic conditions of Employment Act, an employer may require an employee to provide a sick note if the employee has been absent from work for 2 consecutive days. If the employee fails to do that, they may forfeit 2 days' payment, and at worst, they may be dismissed for misconduct. No cogent reasons exist for their absenteeism.
Thabiso, is there a difference between a fake sick note and an illegal sick note? And which one can actually lead to a dismissal?
Yes, there is. A fake sick note is a sick note that is not issued by a doctor, but by an unscrupulous character, let's say somewhere in Hillbrow or Sunnyside. I'm not sure of unscrupulous areas in the Western Cape, but if you know Hillbrow, you know what I'm talking about. Because what can happen is that an employer may go looking for the practice in order to confirm the validity of the sick note. And when they get there, they find that not only does the practice not exist, but the doctor does not exist. An illegal sick note is one issued by a doctor to a person who is not sick. It's basically a sick note on demand, and you can actually be fired for this. In fact, for both of them, you will be fired. So that's the difference between an illegal sick note and a fake sick note. Let me also add that doesn't mean that a doctor who issues an illegal sick note cannot issue legal and valid sick notes. In fact, even as you've alluded to this Woolworths case in the Labour Appeals Court, which involves Woolworths, it's centered around the validity of a sick note issued by a doctor where the doctor was suspected of being dodgy.
Who is qualified to give an acceptable medical certificate or sick note?
That is a very good question, Ian. A valid and legal sick notes can only be issued by a medical practitioner who is registered with the Health Profession Council of South Africa. And that includes sangomas, as people may be surprised. Sangomas who practice traditional medicine. So employers should take note that medical certificates by sangomas have the equivalence of an HPCSA medical certificate.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that part about the sangomas. What happens if an employer suspects a certain doctor is selling sick notes and some employees have submitted sick notes from this doctor?
Well, I guess that brings us to this Woolworths case, which is a very pertinent case. It's Woolworths versus the CCMA and others. Basically, what happened is that a Woolworths employee submitted a sick note from a doctor who was suspected of issuing irregular sick notes. In fact, what happened here is that Woolworths, one of the Woolworths stores, received an email warning them about sick notes from this particular doctor, Dr. Frempong. And so Woolworths, subsequent to the employee submitting the sick note, Woolworths embarked on an investigation, basically coming to the conclusion that the doctor's practice was unbecoming of a doctor's practice. For example, he had long nails, he had files on the table dispersed all over, the place was untidy. They noticed people coming in and out to buy sick notes. And having considered all the evidence they gathered, Woolworths fired this Miss Masego, who was the employee, who then took the matter to the CCMA, and ultimately it came before the Labour Appeals Court. The court held that just because a doctor was engaging in selling illegal sick notes, that doesn't disqualify that same doctor of seeing a genuinely sick patient and booking them off work. The court further said that when an employer suspects a doctor of malfeasance, that employer should conduct an investigation together with regulatory bodies. And the result should be that it warns its employees of that doctor that they should not consult with that doctor and bring sick notes from that particular day. And that the employer should not place a burden on employees to embark on such an investigation. And lastly, at the core of the decision by this court was the fact that the doctor's qualifications were not challenged by Woolworths, neither was the assertion that the dismissed employee was sick on the day.
Okay, and then our final question for today, Thabiso. Does this mean an employer cannot dismiss an employee because the employer suspects the doctor to be dubious but cannot prove the employee was not sick?
That is correct, Ian. In other words, if you can prove that the employee was not sick on the day, or that the doctor who issued the sick note doesn't have the requisite qualification or registration, the dismissal will be substantively unfair. However, employees should be very careful, as this case should be distinguished from other cases where an employee obtained a valid sick note, but then went on to attend a rally and other activities. In that case, the employee's dismissal was held to be fair. So there should be a distinguishing that is done there so that people don't think you can do as you want.
Thabiso from Hahn Hahn Attorneys, thank you so much for shedding light on this matter today. We really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much, Ian, and thank you for the opportunity.
Are you or your business in trouble and struggling to find a solution? Call Hahn Hahn Attorneys as we assist clients in finding solutions. We specialize in consumer and food law, commercial and construction law, forensic investigations and administrative law. Visit hahnlaw.co.za. That's HAHN. We assist clients nationwide. Hahn Hahn Attorneys, because we care. Don't miss Legal Talk with Hahn Hahn Attorneys, Wednesday mornings at 10 on eRadio.